Hey everyone, Peter Finger here, and I've got exciting news. On March 19th, we're hosting the Triad Mental Health Summit Series. This event is online and completely free to attend. This summit will feature Owen Marcus, co-founder of MELD, and Sheetal Shah, CEO of Mental Health Partners, two innovative experts exploring the intersection of somatic therapy and modern AI tools for healthcare transformation. This dynamic experience will offer practical strategies for supporting men's health through embodied somatic practices, alongside cutting-edge insights into utilizing AI to enhance healthcare outcomes. Participants will explore how somatic approaches and technology-driven solutions can work to improve care outcomes. Plus, for those looking to stay ahead for professional requirements, CE credits will be available for attendees. Sharlee and I will be hosting live and performing interactive Q&A sessions with each speaker, so you can go deeper on what matters most to you. This event isn't just professional development, it's a chance to connect with a community of practitioners who are growing alongside this field. So head over to triadhq.com/TSS to see our full schedule and register for free. That's triadhq.com/TSS. I look forward to seeing you there. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guests today are Chris Yadon and Ana Megrelishvili. Chris is the Managing Director of Saprea, a nonprofit devoted to liberating individuals and society from child sexual abuse through both healing and prevention. Chris was the very first employee of Saprea back in 2015, and since then he has led its growth into a global leader in survivor support and education. With his background in executive leadership, Chris brings both strategic insight and deep personal commitment to this critical mission. Ana is a survivor, advocate, and community leader from Atlanta. Ana co-chairs the annual Saprea Gala, raising awareness and vital support for the organization's work. She uses her voice and lived experience to bring visibility to the realities of child sexual abuse and to inspire hope and healing for fellow survivors. Together, Chris and Ana are here to share not only the heart of Saprea's mission, but also the lived experience of what their healing programs can mean for survivors. In our episode, we'll explore how Saprea supports adult survivors of child sexual abuse through healing programs, community connection, and prevention efforts, while hearing firsthand from Ana about her personal journey of resilience and transformation. Welcome back to the show, Chris, and thank you so much for coming to be with us. Ana, thank you both so much for coming.
So grateful to be here. It was great last time. Grateful for the invite back.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today.
No problem. Thank you both. So, Chris, for listeners or those who have not heard our first conversation and those who may be new to Saprea, can you briefly remind us what Saprea is and what the mission is behind it?
Yeah, at Saprea, we liberate individuals and society from child sexual abuse and its lasting impact. So when we say liberating individuals, we're talking about healing services for adults who experience child sexual abuse. And when we talk about liberating society, we're talking about empowering parents with the tools and resources they need to reduce risk for their kids and raising awareness or driving awareness in society around the issue of child sexual abuse.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And so, Ana, would you be willing to share a little bit about your journey and what led you to Saprea and what really made you to decide to participate in the program?
Yes, absolutely. I was actually invited to be on Saprea's committee for a gala about 3 years ago. And when I was first invited, that's when I learned about one of the resources that Saprea has, a 4-day retreat for survivors of child sexual abuse. And part of me at the beginning agreed to do it more so from the perspective, I didn't really need anything more healing wise. I was pretty cocky back then. And I said, but to be on the Saprea Gala committee, I think it would benefit me to know what it feels like to go through it. I'm a child survivor myself. And so I thought, okay, this will help me quite a bit in my journey. And of course, the retreat just blew my mind away, and I've learned so much and definitely changed my attitude about it after I went through it.
Got you, got you. And even expanding more on that, Anna, I was going to ask you what types of challenges or barriers were you facing in your healing journey, but it sounds like you didn't think that you had too many. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So by the time I went to the Saprea retreat, I've gone through, I would say, probably combined 8 years of various types of therapies. So from regular going to psychologists to EMDR to hypnotherapy. So I've had a lot of challenges in my life, but at that point I thought, oh, I've dealt with them all. And
Hmm.
I almost looked at Saprea retreat as my graduation, so to say, from therapy.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting during the Saprea retreat. I think the biggest takeaway for me was that actually healing is a lifelong journey, and you don't really graduate from it. You just get better than you were yesterday. And then to come to some of your question about some of the challenges, I specifically had two that I overcame. One was I became an extreme type A overachiever, trying to really prove my worth to the world. That
Yeah.
the shameful past, I felt a lot of shame and isolation, and that pushed me to really go further in my career, education, and so on, to the point where I would physically make myself sick every year because I would just not allow myself to even relax. So that was kind of perfectionism, overachiever type.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
second, I went almost entire life thinking that I am not going to have children and I don't want to have children. And there were a lot of reasons behind my decision making that in my mind, I thought it was truly my logical decision. I was justifying it with, want to focus on my career. I don't want to change my lifestyle. I don't want to pass on my genes, right? Based on my childhood upbringing and all the trauma that I went through. And
Yeah.
so for, gosh, almost 33 years, I was like, nope, motherhood is not for me. And then suddenly I had this breakthrough in therapy, and almost like a light switch went on in my brain. And suddenly I longed to be a mother. And so that was a really big aha moment for me, because I
Hmm.
realized that it was trauma that was holding me back from such
Yeah.
an important decision. And so these aha moments helped me to realize, like, oh, maybe I'm not done. And then going to Saprea retreat really solidified that, hey, it's a progress, and I'm still a work in progress.
Wow. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you.
Of course.
So, Chris, in our last conversation, you mentioned that adults who have survived or experienced child sexual abuse are often overlooked. Why do you think that is such a critical gap to address?
One thing to realize about survivors of childhood trauma, when the trauma has been by their choice or other people's choices set aside,
Mm.
we learn to cope with that trauma. And ironically, some of the coping mechanisms that are most common for survivors of child sexual abuse are things like what Anna described, which is hyperproductivity is one of them. So let me just use that one as an example. And this isn't to speak on Anna's experience specifically, this is just generally about
Okay.
survivors. That hyperproductivity is a really common sign of what's called emotional numbing, where we numb our emotions so we don't have to deal with them. Because when we sit and we're quiet, then those emotions come up and we have to face them, and we have to deal with the pain and suffering that may surface with disruptive emotions. But if we stay hyperproductive, we can set those aside. We can focus on other things. Well, that is just one simple example of why survivors are overlooked, because there are many survivors of childhood trauma of all sorts, but child sexual abuse specifically, that are very, very accomplished. They seem to have everything together. And it's not a false story, it's a parallel story. Like a survivor that's very accomplished should own those accomplishments. They're hers or his. They should be proud of them. They're not hiding another part of themselves, but it's a parallel story that they're living while setting aside the trauma. And so we as a society see that and we're like, they're okay. But inside there's this storm that's brewing. And over time, we find, particularly if they're developing post-traumatic stress symptoms, that storm tends to get bigger and more intense to the point that they reach a breaking point, or as some people say, they eventually have to pay the bill. The bill is counting up and eventually they have to pay the bill. And that's why so many survivors of childhood trauma don't actually get help for that trauma until midlife. The bill is finally accounted enough that they can no longer set it aside.
Yeah.
So that's just one example. There are many other reasons why it doesn't get dealt with, but I'll just give that as one example of why we as a society tend to overlook adult survivors of child sexual abuse.
Got you. Kind of blending in and not wanting to, they don't want to address those things. Understood. So Chris, can you walk us through the different healing programs that Saprea does offer and what makes them unique?
Yeah. I'll actually do the unique side first and then go
Okay.
through the programs. What makes Saprea unique is we really looked at what was available to adult survivors of child sexual abuse and designed our services to wrap around the gaps. So what was generally available to survivors when we came into the space is individual therapy and tremendous breakthroughs in individual therapy that are life-changing. Ana mentioned one. EMDR has been pivotal for trauma survivors as an example. But what's missing in that individual therapeutic experience are psychoeducation. So really understanding how trauma impacts the brain and the body, specifically how sexual trauma impacts day-to-day living, the different aspects of our lives. So many survivors have a tough time connecting the dots between what they experience day-to-day and their childhood trauma. So we connect those dots for them. Second thing is exposure to lots of different methods of healing or experiences of ways they can heal outside of that individual therapy experience, whether that's a mindfulness, support group work, sleep hygiene, and there's many. But we expose them to a lot of those services in a relatively small amount of time so that they can quickly see, wow, that really connected with me. When I go home from this experience, or when I leave this webinar, or when I get off this website, I am going to go try trauma-sensitive yoga, or I'm going to go try a martial art to augment my individual therapeutic experience. And then the last one is community. So many survivors deal with their experiences alone. And an individual therapeutic relationship is community. It's a one-on-one relationship and it is community, but it's not a community necessarily with other survivors who understand and get what you're going through without you having to even say anything. And there's something about that lived experience and being able to support one another in that lived experience that invites self-compassion and is crucial to normalizing your experiences and destigmatizing the abuse. So that's what makes us different. That's what we focus on. We do it through a 4-day in-person program called the Saprea Retreat, followed by 9 weeks of online learning. We have our support group programs, which are 27 weeks of self-directed, peer-led, peer-run by survivor, for survivor support groups.
Nice.
We have our 17 symptom-based online healing resources. So a survivor can go on our website and look by symptom. Like, I'm dealing with panic attacks. What does that have to do with my childhood trauma? What resources do I have to heal or manage those panic attacks? And so we have those services. We have a half-day healing webinar. If I want to dip my toe in the water, I'm not quite sure if I want to go on this journey yet, but want to dip my toe in the water, we have that half-day session. And then one I'm super excited about because it's relatively new and having huge impact is a 10-week course that has been deployed into prison and jail systems across the United States and has already been consumed by over 30,000 individuals that are currently involved with the justice system. So those are the programs that we deployed to act on that unique spot that we feel in the marketplace.
Absolutely. And I think I mentioned this the last time that we talked, but I really appreciate that you say survivors. and not victims. I think that is also something that is unique to Saprea's approach to education, community, and the retreat is the idea that this is you have survived this and not necessarily that you were a victim of it. That changes the framing of the how you feel about what has happened. So I really appreciate that term is used instead of victim.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Anna, I know that you felt like you had done lots of work prior to participating in the retreat, but I kind of want to dig a little deeper into the retreat and what that felt like for you. So, going in as someone who felt healed, who felt ready to do everything and move forward in life, what did it feel like to walk into the retreat for the first time? And were you surprised at all about your experience moving through it?
Yeah, I have to say, there were a few things that definitely were pleasant surprises for me. Saprea is incredibly thoughtful in everything in regards to the retreat. So I'll give you some examples. From the moment we arrive, it's almost like we are catered to. So one of the things that happened to many of us as survivors is we put our needs second and we serve others ahead of us. And
Mhm.
so Saprea recognizes that. And so the whole experience during the retreat was all about making sure we felt taken care of. We couldn't carry our own suitcase to the room. We had this incredible chef cook this nutritious, delicious food for us 3 times a day. And we had this beautiful experience where nothing was required of us. Any session that we didn't feel like we wanted to attend, we were not obligated to go. So it was very much about you need to feel comfortable. We're here to help you. It is about you. It's not about us. If there's something that's triggering to you, you don't have to participate. So that gave us a lot of ease. And I agree with Chris that having community is incredibly important. At that point, I've already it's been about a year since I publicly said that I am a survivor, but I have never been in the room with other women who have experienced the same thing I have. And it was very interesting as I was sharing certain things from the past. You could just see just this understanding nods and same thing somebody was sharing. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've done that. And so there was this bonding experience between all of us. And granted, we all had different paths and we also were at different stages in our healing process. So we were not the same. One of our group mates couldn't attend half of that because she just was going through a lot. But we were there to surround her with love and we called each other the Thrive Tribe at the end. So it was just such a beautiful experience. And there were still some things that I didn't realize I was dealing with that came up during the retreat. And so it was helpful because in life, you get busy, you kind of push down the feelings. And this is
Yeah.
4 days where you just kind of sit down, rest, and allow for whatever happens. And different people, again, had different experiences, but I'm just so grateful. I really think that I really advanced in my healing because of the community that I had there.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com and use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
Very nice, very nice. And so, listening to Chris discuss the rest of the programs and things that are offered for survivors, did you take advantage of any of the other programs offered? And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I am part of the Facebook group that meets once a week for survivors, and it's
Mhm.
led by survivors. So I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia. So there's a local chapter where we are a part of this Facebook group, but you don't have to be in Atlanta to join it. So what I got interested in is Saprea has incredible resources on educating how to educate children
Mhm.
at age appropriate levels about what is considered to be appropriate and inappropriate, because I have nephews and just friends kids, and so I wanted to educate myself at what age what is appropriate to teach them, because I want to make sure that what I experienced no child has to go through, at least in my circle and my influence sphere.
Awesome, awesome. And my next thought was going to be about the programs for prevention and education. So, Chris, we talked about it in our last conversation. I since have started to, look at the website. I've got two children, two young boys, now 12 and 6. And so I've really started to dig into the resources that you have available on your site. We talked about how you don't know as a parent the kinds of things that you should share that are age appropriate for our children. Can you talk with us a bit about why you feel like it's important to start those conversations early, even as young as infants or toddlers?
Yeah, I'll share a story, and I hope it's not one I shared last time. I don't remember if I shared this one or not, but I think it highlights the start early point. So my youngest daughter, she's now 11. When she was a toddler, if I remember right, she was about 3. We walked out into the kitchen and found her standing on the kitchen counter. And that's not the safest thing for a 3-year-old to be doing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
we, meaning Christy, my wife, and I asked her, "Hey, will you get down? Just easy, will you get down?" She said no. And so we asked again, "Hey, will you get down?" And she said no. And third time we got a little more firm with her, like, "You need
Mhm.
to get down."
Yeah.
And her response was, "It's my body and I choose." Right? So imagine a little 3-year-old saying that.
Mhm.
"It's my body and I choose." So we had one of those parenting moments like, "Oh, we have been
You
teaching
did teach
her
that. Yeah.
that."
Yeah.
And there are so many cool things that came out of it, right? First is just the recognition that even a 3-year-old could start learning something like bodily autonomy.
Mhm.
Very appropriate for that age to learn, hey, this is my body and I'm in charge of it,
Yeah.
right? On the other side of it is the parenting. Of course, I went over and picked her up and put her down on the ground because a
Mhm.
3-year-old doesn't have their brain developed enough to know whether it's appropriate to stay on the table or not. So there's a balance there, right? Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We taught her basics about bodily autonomy. So that's one example of something that you can start really young and then it progresses as they get older. So another example would be my daughter before she started dating. We had extensive discussions around sexual assault and dating safety.
Mhm.
So age appropriate, right? As she's about to
Right.
get ready to date, the two most common times for sexual assault are the first year of college and the first year of dating. So we were informed by that information. We had the resources and tools we needed from Saprea to know which conversations to have at which age. So those are just a couple of examples, and certainly encourage listeners to go spend some time on saprea.org and dig into those age appropriate resources. The last
Absolutely.
thing I'll say, just beyond age appropriate, what we really focus on in prevention is also about us as the adults getting our own selves right with our emotions.
Mhm.
One of
Mhm.
the biggest things we can do to prevent child sexual abuse of our kids is to co-regulate our emotions with our kids. As they're learning how to regulate their emotions and they're big and broad at those young ages, we're there to co-regulate with them to help them develop a strong sense of self and autonomy and strength and power. But that comes when a parent's taking care of their own things in their life,
Mhm.
their own emotional
Yeah.
challenges. So
Mhm.
that's a huge part of prevention as well. So it is about teaching the kids, but it's just as much about looking inside and say, what do I need to do as a parent to be healthy and ready support my kid and protect them.
I come from Eastern European culture, and in our culture, it's expected to, like, when greeting, to kiss each other on the cheek.
Mm.
And I experienced this as a child a lot, where adults wanted to kiss me and I didn't want to, but it was like, it was almost my parents would force me to because it's culturally expected to. And
Yeah.
so a lot of it made me uncomfortable. And so now I spend a lot of my time teaching my friends who are Eastern Europeans to say, no, you need not to force your children to kiss adults if they're not comfortable, and not shame them for it, because that's what we went through, because there's that cultural stigma around it. And then I explain why using the Saprea resources. And it's so interesting how it sometimes just clicks with the parent and they're like, oh, you're right, I shouldn't be forcing my children. And I teach them, right? Like, if their child, and I say, hey, can I get a hug? If they say no, I don't push it. I say,
Right.
you're okay. You don't have to hug me, and I don't push it. But that also is very common in Latin culture as well, because I have a lot
It
of
is.
friends in that community where the touchy feeliness is there. But I think even there we have to educate that children needs to understand their boundaries, and if they don't feel comfortable, it's okay for them to say no.
Absolutely. I live in the South. I'm in North Carolina now, but I grew up in or born and raised in South Carolina. And so we didn't necessarily kiss on the cheek, but the hug was, you had to hug everyone. It was not okay to not hug people. When I still get looks from people now, like, you're not going to make them hug me. I am not. If he does not want to hug you, he does not have to. I mean, it is what it is. Like, he will speak to you. They will speak. But if
Yep.
they don't want to hug, that is not something that I'm going to make them do. That is their body to say. Now, like you, Chris, it has backfired on me. And I'm like, come give me a hug. And they're like, no, mom, I don't want to touch. So sometimes it does kind of, you get that parenting like, yeah, I taught you that. So, okay, I just can't be too mad about this. But I mean, it is, yeah, I completely agree that teaching those types of things, and just at a young age, teaching age appropriate boundaries, even just that as a start, is incredibly important. And they will carry that with them as they continue on and get older. I am curious, Chris, and I don't remember if we talked about this before, but is there a point where it's too late? Do you go backwards and try to teach some boundary type things if you haven't taught your children things until they're teenagers, and do you need to go backwards? Do you just pick up where they are? How would you tell someone to work on that?
Yeah, there's definitely not a point it's too late. The longer you wait, it may be more challenging. Your kids may put up more resistance, but it's never too late. In fact, the principles we're trying to teach our kids are really healthy for us as adults, and sometimes we haven't even learned them as adults. So
Agree.
it's never too late. The proverb around when's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, when's the second best time today, certainly holds true in this case. You have an opportunity today. Too late for you is to do it tomorrow. So choose to do it today. That's kind of the way we need to look at it. No matter where your kids are at in their progress or their development, it's worth your time to start today and do what you can.
Agreed. So, as we did discuss before, there are certain groups like LGBTQ youth, racial minorities, children with disabilities that do face higher risk. Chris, can you talk about how Saprea works with cultural competency to support these specific communities? And are there educational programs specifically designed for different groups of people?
Yeah, cultural competency is a really interesting topic. There was, I think, for some time a movement to develop cultural competency. I think
Right,
that's shifting now to acknowledging that when you're dealing with literally thousands of cultures and subcultures worldwide, tens of thousands, it's impossible to develop cultural competency. Even to develop cultural competency for one culture that's different than yours takes years and years and years.
Yes.
So our approach at Saprea is partnership. We go to the people that have that culture, and we rely on them to evaluate what we offer and decide what's appropriate, what needs to be adjusted, when it needs to be adjusted. So let me give you a simple example. A few years ago, we were working hard to deliver our first retreat program to Spanish speakers. So think the primary audience being first generation Spanish speakers here in the United States. most of which had immigrated. They were first generation immigrants. And we got enough people that retreat, had a great experience. So we're like, hey, this is a go, let's go. We had some people on our staff that were first generation immigrants, Spanish speakers that helped make that happen, right? We have our cultural competency, right? Let's go. Well, we quickly learned that continuing to fill those retreats was extremely difficult, and we didn't understand why. So we tapped into our cultural competency approach, which includes a lot of listening, went to groups and organizations that are trusted in our community that serve the Spanish-speaking population, said, what are we getting wrong here? And they said, for first-generation immigrants to want to go to a retreat with an organization that they don't really know or trust is extremely difficult. I was like, of course it is. Of course it is. Like after the fact, like we should have thought of that, right? So we're like, okay, we'll switch to a virtual experience. We were still having struggles getting people in, even to that virtual experience. So we went back to those organizations and they said, you need to develop trust with community organizations that already have the trust of Spanish speakers, have them recommend your services, and then you'll have people come. That's exactly what happened. That's how we solved for that particular need in the community. And that would be a really good example of how we at Saprea approach cultural competency. We're going to surround ourselves with those that are from that culture, from that race, from that ethnicity, from that socioeconomic class to inform how we deliver our services.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. And so, Chris, a lot of times listeners for our show are practitioners. So they may be therapists, mental health professionals. So for those practitioners, when they're working with survivors who may be dealing with PTSD-like symptoms or just struggling in general, what would you say to them? How can you help them get support?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, allow Saprea to be part of your treatment planning. We are not and never have intended to replace individual therapy. In fact, our therapists who run our programs also have individual therapy practice themselves. So we believe wholeheartedly in individual therapy, support it, know its critical nature. So we want a therapist or a practitioner to see us as a resource to augment what they're doing. Everything we do is free. So it's easy for them to include us as part of their treatment planning. And more, we're seeing more and more therapists make all of our programs part of their treatment planning. For example, maybe they have a client that's a trauma survivor of child sexual abuse that's dealing with panic attacks. We have a module on panic attacks. So they have their, say, weekly session with them. They can give Saprea's link to that particular module as their homework or treatment work per se for the week for the client. It's a perfect way to use our resources. You mentioned you're in North Carolina. One of our highest referring practitioners is from North Carolina. And he said, if I have a child sexual abuse survivor, the very first recommendation I give to them is to go to the Saprea retreat because it will accelerate our work, meaning our individual therapy work, by at least 6 months.
Wow.
So that 4-day experience can, in his opinion, supplant 6 months of individual therapy work. Wow. So those are examples of how I would encourage a practitioner to use our programming. And we have information sessions for practitioners to ask all the questions with our therapeutic team. We typically run those at least once a month. So you can go to saprea.org, click on our contact us form, inquire about it, and we'll get an invitation out to one of those information sessions that we do for therapists.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yep.
I know I work in a dialysis clinic, so I don't necessarily do a lot of individual therapy, but I have mentioned the website to a few of my patients, and some of them aren't necessarily tech savvy, but we have discussed it, and I'm hoping that at some point that they will take advantage of it. So it is nice to know that other clinicians and practitioners are using it in their work as well with their survivors.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, Anna, as someone with lived experience, what was one of the most meaningful takeaways from your time in Sapria's program and still participating in the community today?
I think Sapria's retreat took away the pressure for me that I felt like I had this pressure to fix myself. And there was this end goal that I had to reach, and then I'll be all better and all healed. And that retreat took away that pressure. And now I look at it, like I said, it like more of a lifelong journey. And I compare myself to who I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and yesterday. And as long as I see the progress, it's great. But also, Saprea allowed me to know that if there is a setback, and it could be, because it's not a linear progression when it comes to
Right.
healing. Sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's okay. You could still have some triggers. It was interesting. Within the last year, something has happened that I had a trigger, and I haven't had it in years, like many, many years. And I think if would not have gone to Saprea retreat, I would have been beating myself up for it. What is wrong with you? Like, you've been through it, you're fine. You've gone through so much therapy. And now it's like, well, it happened. So why did it
Yeah.
happen? And using the techniques I learned, I separate my identity from my trauma. And that's a very, very important distinction, where I think in the past it was more intertwined.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So, Chris, as you look to the future, what are Sapria's goals as you continue to scale your program and reach more survivors?
So part of our goal was encapsulated in what Anna just shared. So I'll highlight something she shared. Our goal at Saprea is really to empower that survivor to become a steward of their own healing. Just as she described, healing isn't the absence of symptoms.
Mm.
It is a combination of symptom reduction and an increase in my ability to manage symptoms when they surface. So when she had a trigger, her ability to manage that symptom, that is healing just as much as the reduction of symptoms. And when you combine those two, meaning you reduce the amount of triggers or symptoms you have, but when they do surface, you increase your ability to manage them, that turns into significant changes in overall well-being or life satisfaction measures or indicators. That's really what we look at when we look at Saprea. We're looking at those three metrics. Can we reduce symptoms? Can we increase coping efficacy? And does that lead to overall well-being or life satisfaction? So that's the box we check. So when we say, what does our future look like? We want to continue to check that box, those three things, but we want to be able to do it with the masses. We reached a little over 30,000 individuals in our first 10 years through our prevention and healing programs. In 2025, the first 10 months, we've had an additional little over 33,000 people participate in our programs,
Wow.
most of those virtual. Still a lot of in person, but most of those virtual when we're talking those numbers.
Mhm.
We have to reach the millions and the tens of millions and frankly, the hundreds of millions to accomplish our aspirational goals.
Mhm.
And the only way you do that is through scaling. So it's balancing that outcome that we're after that I described with reaching the masses. If we reach the masses and they don't reach outcomes, that's not great. Or we can reach outcomes one at a time, and that is really great for those individuals, but it doesn't
Mhm.
shift the societal need, right? It
Yeah.
shifts the outcome for that one person. And I don't want to minimize that for a second because it's about that one person. But we want to reach millions of ones, not hundreds of ones or even thousands of ones. So that's what we're focused on at Saprea over these next 10 years. We need a lot of resources to do that. That includes people advocating, people lending their mic, just like you are today. It includes generous donors that can help fund that type of work. It includes a society that's willing to stop turning away and looking the other way at the issue of child sexual abuse and acknowledge that this is an issue that affects people worldwide. 1 in 8 children worldwide are sexually abused by age 18. 1 in 8 here in the United States. And we got to get people to stop looking away and sweeping it under the rug. So we need everybody to come to the table to solve this issue, but we believe in the future. We have answers. We're hopeful. We believe in collaborative support with lots of other organizations joining side by side with us in this work. And we love the trends and love the direction it's going.
Awesome. Awesome. I can't wait to continue to see Saprea grow and reach those masses. I'm glad to be a piece of that part of the sharing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. So as we come to a close, for our listeners who want to learn more, maybe get involved, access resources, where should people go?
Go to saprea.org, saprea.org. You can also find us on all of the major social channels. We have a lot of content we push out there. We'd love to have you check out what we're doing. We'd love to have you partner. We'd love to have you donate. We'd love to have you volunteer. Whatever the right fit is for you, we'd love to have you come get in this work with us.
Awesome. Awesome. Chris and Anna, I have really appreciated you guys speaking with us today.
Thank you, Sharlee.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. And if you like our show, please be sure to give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.